Hello, I'm Dr. Harriet Fraad.
And I'm Juliana Forlano here with our podcast, Capitalism Hits Home.
This is a show about the intersections of capitalism, race, gender, class, and all aspects of our personal lives.
We hope to educate, activate, and maybe even alleviate some of the burdens we all experience living in a capitalist USA.
We hope this program serves you well. It's brought to you by Democracy at Work.
Well, what an exciting time to be doing a podcast and a show. Our main topic today is going to be the intersection of sex, sexuality, and capitalism, part 3, Sex for Sale, the commodification of sex under capitalism, and the sugar industry. We're also going to be talking in the news stories about the insurrection in DC. But first, we like to share how capitalism has personally hit us at home. I think it's always so important, Harriet, to tie in, what we're thinking about in terms of the theory to how it's actually hitting us right here at home. And not to go on here, but I know we discussed one of the things we wanted to talk about. I don't know if you can actually hear. Upstairs is my daughter. She is doing heaven knows what with my husband, who has had to take half the day off so that I could work, and then I'll take half the day off so that he can work. Neither of us have told our bosses that we'll be working, trying to do the whole job in half the time because, someone close to my child got COVID at her school. They didn't tell us who it was, whether it was another student or a teacher or something. And they basically just closed the whole school. So there is no in-person schooling at all. And she is 4.5. So for me, the online thing is like not great. Forget it. It's worse. I try to keep my kids away from screens, and now school is going to be screens. This really goes against my parenting philosophy here. Harriet, when I told you this, it's so always wonderful to talk to you because you were so deeply knowledgeable about what's going on in general. And then you made me feel like I thought that was really important for the people to hear.
I think so too. 95% of private school students are in school in small groups, protected, tested, and taken care of. 62% of American children are not in school, sitting in front of screens, dealing with computers they really may not know how to deal with, having parents who can't fix glitches in their computers, having people yell and scream in the background or not be there to tell them to be on at all. Therefore, they're not getting educated. The educational divide is getting bigger and bigger, along with the racial divide and the income divide, because the 1% got a 160% increase during COVID, while everyone else got at least a third off, a third lower income. So what we're talking about is the inequality taking a quantum leap forward. And I have to say that there are a million teachers that are unemployed. There is no reason why big cities like New York, where I happen to live, couldn't go into the empty theaters and empty auditoriums and have safe setups for 3 or 4 children per teacher and operate safely and test and track. This is an obscene allocation of even more money up and less for the mass of the American people. It's an outrage. And your daughter is part of it. Yeah.
We're all part of it, I guess, even.
Yes.
It's hard, and it's just, what could we possibly do? It's not like you can say in America, you can't have a private school if the public school is crappy in your district. It's just not something that, what could be done to
Well,
make
what
sure
could
that
be
kids in
done?
the public school are, go ahead.
What could be done would be to have a program of educational parks for all students, so the resources would be pooled and you'd have a college campus like setup that could be rendered safe. If private schools can render themselves safe and educate their students, so can public schools. It's the discrepancy between the way the rich are treated and the way everyone else, but the top 10% are treated. And of course,
It's
it
funny.
can be done.
So many of these stories of what's happening with the pandemic, what's happening in the economy are all buried this week, given yet another Trump chaos creation, the insurrection in DC. And we wanted to kind of touch on that in terms of the insurrection and the intersection of that with capitalism, because this is our show. Capitalism hits home.
Yeah.
Harriet, what are your thoughts about, how these things or this particular event intersects with capitalism, and why these things don't necessarily have to happen when there's a lot of shared resources going around?
Well, I think it's happened because capitalists exported jobs, millions of jobs, mainly male jobs, overseas in order to make a greater profit. Trump is always railing against China, but 50% of China's businesses were started by Americans to have lower prices with cheaper Chinese labor. So there you have it. Millions
Mm-hmm.
of jobs were exported. That would create a lot of rage on the part of the men who used to be able to make a family wage, support dependent wives and children, and have a kingly position in their family and a substantial position in their community because they had a substantial job. Capitalists robbed them of those things and were clever enough in a fascistic manner with Donald Trump to push the rage from that dispossession of the basics of life, whether it's your job in manufacturing or whether it's your family's grocery store, dry cleaners, music store, gun store, hardware store, into Walmart. And it's similar with all the
Harriet,
corporate tax breaks they get.
you and I both obviously have psychoanalytical backgrounds. My understanding is that anger usually comes from two places, be it fear or hurt. And it seems like if you are fearful that you cannot feed your children, then anger is, inflamed. If you are hurt that you have been tossed aside by society, then you are hurt. Now, I have to say, some of these insurrectionists have just bought into propaganda that it's the black guy's fault, or, they're not necessarily all there because they're hurt and angry and upset, and therefore almost, a figure of pity. But it does seem like there are many groups that are involved in creating these monsters. You made mention of offshoring of jobs. I spoke with Lori Wallach recently in an interview, and she talked about, what was it, the America First loophole or Buy America First loophole in trade policy that basically says anything that the government is going to buy has to buy from American producers first, and if they can't get it here, they can go somewhere else. With the exception of these 60 countries. I mean, how many countries are there? Are you really going to go to Guam for your, computer parts? I don't know. It's just, the fact, this is what got me. I mean, a lot got me this week about this, but the fact that Donald Trump, for 4 years and years even before that, promised these people that he was going to help their situation. And then he could have done something as easy as by executive order, because this is something an executive is under the executive power could do. He could have closed that particular trade loophole, and all of that, all of those, the purchases made by the government would have to come from the US, and therefore businesses who have outsourced all their labor would be motivated to bring some of that labor and creation back to the United States. He could have done that. He did nothing for these people. And just, I don't even get why they're still
Well,
lionizing him.
one of the reasons they're lionizing them is because the Democratic Party hasn't done what it should, which is to say, look at it. He promised you jobs. They're not
Yeah, they're leaving it to
forthcoming.
us.
He
We're doing that.
promised, yeah, he promised you production. It hasn't happened. He promised you prosperity. That hasn't happened. You have gotten poorer. What has he done? He's given the swamp, the rich, the biggest tax write off in history. He's responsible for the fact that they've profited as you have withered. And someone who had a socialistic agenda would say to the United States, okay, the private employer won't employ you as they wouldn't in the 30s. We will. there's 26 million unemployed. Here are 26 million jobs at decent pay, the way we already did. It's not all brand new. And so that people's would have the prosperity that Trump promised and didn't deliver. But the Democrats don't say that and won't do it because they have the same corporate donors. And therefore, they have to be pushed hard, and perhaps they have to be left for another party. That's what's wrong. There is no voice out there saying he hasn't produced what he promised. He gave it all to the rich. This is our program to give it to you. There's no
Yeah,
class redress out there. And that's
exactly.
why.
Yes. Gosh, you put it so clearly, Harriet. I always love being on the program with you just for that exact reason.
Same.
Um, we're going to be segueing into our main story for discussion. But first, I do want to thank everyone who is supporting our program, either by sharing it and making comments. If you make comments in a YouTube program, even just a comment, which is free, it helps the YouTube algorithm to suggest that people like the show, people are interacting with the show, and they spread it farther and wider. So if you make a comment, first of all, we'll read it, and second of all, it does help the show. Also, would like to thank the people who are financially supporting the program. We couldn't do this without you. We are supported and funded in part by Democracy at Work. They have given us, I think, 90 days to figure out how to make ourselves fully self-supporting. We have not met that goal yet. We increased our production to get to you once a week instead of once a month or once every 2 weeks. And so anyway, this is my hat in hand ask, because we would like to continue to do this for you, but the production costs are beyond what we're able to bring in. So we understand that people are having a hard time, and we are not asking you, if you cannot afford it, to support us financially. You could support us in other ways. But if you can, please go to patreon.com/capitalism hits home. Again, it's patreon.com/capitalism hits home. I'm sure there's going to be a link at in the notes of this YouTube video, and make a recurring contribution if you can. It could be $1, could be $80, could be $8 billion if you're a millionaire who wants to learn about why you're bad. That's why you're watching our show. But again, thank you for the support, and we'll get back to you and let you know how our supporting and fundraising is doing, and what we'll be able to continue to do as time moves on. I think we have maybe another 4 or 5 shows before we have to reevaluate. So get help if you can. No guilt if you can't. You can always do what the politicians do and send thoughts and prayers. Like, we can't help you, but we'll send you thoughts and prayers. Anyway, our next segment, Harriet, I'm going to toss it over to you for this.
Okay, the next segment is about the commodification of sex. And it's one manifestation in the sugar industry, which is a huge industry in the United States. Last time we talked to you about the failure of sex education in the United States because it removes all relationship and interaction and love and humanity from sexuality. It separates it out. In those 17 states where they actually allow 17 out of 50 biologically correct sex information to students, they restrict it to biology. The culture hypes sexuality as sex as the one need men are allowed to have while being very manly.
Mm. Mm.
They're not allowed to need hugs. They're not allowed to need comfort. They're not allowed to need solace. They're not allowed to need a friend. But sex is, it's really induced. It's really hyped. Whereas women are taught to withhold sex in order to be virtuous non-sluts. This is a bad combination, a kind of rape combination. So sex becomes, under capitalism, a scarce commodity. Now, what am I talking about under capitalism? Well, a book has come out, Why is Sex Better Under Socialism, by a scholar of Eastern European Studies, a professor at Penn State, who has all these studies showing that where sex is not a commodity, where sexual relationships are mutual, are equally wanted, can be frankly negotiated, where people can know what they want and be able to say it, whether they're male or female, both have greater satisfaction, and women have particularly greater satisfaction. So here we are with the scarce commodity of sex, which has a particular manifestation in the sugar industry. Well, what's the sugar industry? The sugar industry is a huge, huge industry with hundreds of thousands of pairings of young women who are sexually attractive and usually older but always rich men. And the way it's done is that one negotiates with a sugar baby or a sugar daddy. And the biggest site for sugaring is Sugar Baby University, where the picture on the website shows a beautiful blonde with big glasses showing she's scholarly. And this is a site of,
I'm
yeah,
sorry, you said big glasses. I thought we were going somewhere else. Anyway, go ahead,
yeah,
Sarah.
eyeglasses, right, right. But it's not a strict TNA website. It it is a website of women who are either undergraduates or graduate students who want a sugar baby to pay their tuition and often their room and board as well, so that they can graduate without the crushing debt, which is the biggest debt in the United States, college debt. And for once, their sex as women gives them an economic advantage. So they want to use it. And if we look at a school in New York City, I happen to live in New York City, the sex industry, the sex sugar baby industry is huge at NYU, where it costs just about $60,000 a year to go to NYU, to live in a small dorm room that is shared, to have meals, to pay for books, but not to pay for the summer or entertainment or anything like that. But that's 60 grand a year. So that's $240,000 for your college education. Therefore, NYU, if you're looking at NYU, there are many women who are in the sugar industry, advertising often in Sugar Baby University, where they make a contract with a rich man, and anyone can break that contract at request, where the man states his needs. Let's say he's a businessman. He wants to come to New York once a month and have a woman take a week off to be with him and have what is the most common and most lucrative experience in the sex trades, a GFF, a girlfriend experience, where she gives her emotional labor, listening to him, attending to him. She gives her relational labor, relating to his colleagues as a gracious, beautiful, intelligent woman. And if the contract states, sexual access as well. And we have to remember that 40% of the high end sex industry doesn't even involve sex, it just involves holding someone and talking to them. Because
I did not know this.
men have to hide. A woman named Professor Venkatesh at Columbia has studied this, because men have to hide their emotional needs under the manly rubric of sex in order to get those emotional needs met. At any rate, it's a mutually negotiated contract. Why would women go for this? Obviously, the obvious thing is they don't want to be crushed by debt when they get out of school. The average college debt takes 20 years to pay off, if it's paid off at all. They also don't want to limit themselves to jobs that make a lot of money because they have this debt they have to squeeze out from under. They also don't want to be in a relationship where they're so emotionally tangled up with a man that they leave their location, they leave their job seniority, they have a child, they drop out of the workforce, and they lose 10 years of equivalent salary and promotions. So that's their advantage. For the man, he doesn't have to negotiate the changing terrain of gender relationships. Often he has a wife who he wants to keep in her place, but then he wants to be with this young, attentive woman with whom he doesn't have to negotiate a difficult relationship. She just does what he needs. She senses it and does it. She does all the emotional labor for that. in exchange for support. And he can bring this comely lady to his conferences and business meetings and be the envy of the other men who would like to have something on the side the way he does. So, this is the changed terrain. It's interesting. It's most prevalent in the South, Southern universities, because Southern women are taught
Really?
that their greatest asset is sex. And so they should remain pure, and they have the purity cults and everything. So obviously, if this is most valuable asset, sell it. That's the American way. And so their sexuality is a commodity, the way it isn't in socialist countries, and the way it isn't in countries where sex education teaches you and the culture teaches you that sex is a normal need and it has to be satisfyingly relational. You are with another human being for whom you have co-responsibility to be aware of and communicate your needs and also attend to the other's needs. And therefore, it's easier, more prevalent, and not a scarce commodity. So it's a segue from our last week's show on sex education.
Harriet, what do you think the greater implications to society are that this sugar industry exists? I mean, I know people who don't know anything about it, but because it is part of the society, they are being affected by it in one way or the other. What are your thoughts there?
Well, they're certainly going to be affected if they're at a college because everybody knows somebody in the sugar industry because it's that prevalent. And what it does is it reinforces sex as a commodity. It does so more safely. The average lifespan of a regular prostitute, not in the sugar industry, is 34 years old because men are angry at their needs and therefore try to kill them through killing the woman. So
Wow.
it's safer, but it affects everyone because it's a perversion of a basic need for each other, which shouldn't be commodified. It should be voluntary and interactive as equals. And it affects us because it just deepens that divide and the commodification of sex, which involves everyone. Little boys don't get makeup kit toys and nail polish toys. Girls do. Barbie looks like a prostitute.
Oh, I just my
And
someone just sent my daughter a Barbie Scientist, and it's a Barbie prostitute doll with no underwear. She has a lab coat
yeah,
and a dress and no underwear. And my husband, who is a scientist, is like, I don't think this is accurate to my compatriots. It's not even
yeah,
respectful to their,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
she's
mean,
readily available to for the male scientists as a
like who
commodity to be
wears
traded for grades
yeah,
or whatever,
I don't
you
I
know,
don't
and
know a lot of
you
female
know,
scientists who wear short skirts. That's just like you could get burned
yeah.
in the lab. Anyway.
And they might need to bend over and pick up something, whatever. They're not sexual commodities.
It's
And
just this whole
Barbie
thing makes
is,
me think, like, how do you even date? If you do you have to ask if you're a man and you're dating in college, would you feel comfortable dating someone whose job is, being part of the sugar industry? Now, what if it it's an interesting thing to think, okay, a middle class woman joining the sugar industry versus a woman who is really poor and could not go to college at all. It's not really a choice between take a loan and be in the sugar industry. It's sugar industry or McDonald's work. Not to
right.
put down McDonald's work, but pretty much everyone who works there would probably be somewhere else if they, if circumstances would allow,
Right.
um, just because of the pay scale alone. But anyway,
But
Harriet, your thoughts
also
on that?
the capitalist culture means use everything as a commodity that you have. Sell it, brand it, sell it. That's the
Yeah.
culture.
I mean, we
And
should do a whole program on this, but the coaching industry is basically just you knowing how to be a good friend, and then you sell that. Instead of you just being a
exactly,
friend to people, you sell it. And
exactly.
yeah, it's God. Yeah.
It's a
So there we are.
capitalism, yeah, reaches its tendrils in every aspect of our lives, certainly including sexuality, which the way it's treated is commodified because it's a rare commodity for men to purchase.
Ay. Well,
Anyway,
we are. I know it's like a deep breath inducing topic because the
yes, it
solutions
is.
are not necessarily, I mean, the reason it's not in some of these socialist countries is because they get their colleges for free in certain countries, right? So they don't, this isn't even a desire because they're, as you said so eloquently, the tone of the sexual environment is totally different. Um, I'm sure there is sex work in other countries, who that
Yes.
aren't capitalist, but other thoughts about that.
Well, there is very good work showing that it's interesting. The best way to show it is the difference of experience in East German women before the um, wall went down and West German women. East German women, 86%, reported fulfilling orgasms and a wonderful experience. 44% of West German women reported that. Now, why? Well, if you're brought up that sex is something that's going to make you a slut and get you in trouble, it might be harder to relax. A. B. If there is a tradition of the man thinking in marriage also, he will support this woman. So if you buy it, you don't have to worry about it.
Hmm.
The man
Hmm.
pays for the date. He shouldn't have to worry. There's a very funny bit with Richard Pryor where a man and woman are arguing loudly on the stairs. And the father wakes up and says, "What's this about?" And the guy says, "I just spent $50 on her dinner she won't even put out." And the father says, "She won't put out? Call your mother down," right? Well,
Oh,
oh,
oh my.
there is
Oh,
that
Harriet.
trade off. If you buy it, why do you have to worry about the product? Whereas if
Harriet,
somebody's in the,
that's unfortunately all we have time for. We're at the very, I know I see our countdown getting redder and closer to the end. I do want to thank
okay,
everyone for
me too.
listening. And we're going to be starting after we finish the sex series. We have one more we have um, one more in this series is going to be about sex under socialism. And we kind of went there a little bit today, but we're going to dive deeper into that next time. And then after that, we're going to be starting our 7-part series, The 7 Basic Human Needs That Should Be Protected from the Capitalist Marketplace. What do you think they are? Please, we have our ideas. Please add your ideas and your comments into the the
Yeah.
comment space below. And please send us your feedback. We love hearing from you. You can subscribe to us, share us. My Twitter is Juliana Forlano. You can find Democracy at Work on Twitter and Instagram. Same handle, Democracy at WRK. And Harriet's website is harrietfraud.com, HARRITFRAAD. Special thanks to Brian Ipsa, Maria Carnamola-Mania, Liz Phillips, and the whole team at Democracy at Work for making this podcast possible. And thank you to our listeners and supporters, be you financial supporter, spread the word online supporter, or just hearts and minds supporter. We appreciate all of it.
So much.